The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council Hall stretched toward the violet sky of Zenthari Prime, a monument to 10,000 years of peaceful deliberation. Ambassador Cale Morven stood at the entrance, adjusting his diplomatic sash while his translator implant hummed to life. Behind him, his security detail waited nervously. 3 humans against a galaxy that had just declared them a threat. They're really going through with this? Lieutenant Sienna Vex asked, her hand instinctively moving to where her sidearm would have been. Council rules forbade weapons inside the hall. A rule Cale found increasingly foolish. The vote's already passed, Cale replied, his jaw tight. We're here for the sentencing. The charges were absurd. Humans had been accused of violating the Harmony Accords, specifically Article 7. Aggressive expansion and militaristic tendency. The evidence? Humanity had colonized 16 systems in 30 years. The Vrwenen Empire had colonized 3 in 3 centuries and received commendations for their initiative. Cale's aide, Dr. Tomas Reeve, scrolled through his datapad. The Vrwenen representative, Counselor Zethra, is leading the prosecution. She's convinced the council that our rapid breeding and territorial acquisition poses an existential threat to galactic stability. Existential threat, Cale muttered. We haven't fired a shot at anyone. Tell that to the KRLL. Cale fell silent. The KRLL incident was complicated. When the insectoid species had attacked human colony vessels, claiming the Andrus system by right of prior discovery, the human response had been swift and decisive. The Colonial Defense Fleet had arrived within days, not months. They'd negotiated from a position of strength, and the KRLL had retreated without bloodshed. The Council called it intimidation. Humans called it survival. The great doors opened, revealing the amphitheater beyond. 2,000 seats arranged in concentric circles, each occupied by a representative from the galaxy's civilized species. At the center stood the judgment dais, where Counselor Zethra waited, her serpentine form coiled elegantly around the speaking platform. Ambassador Morven, her voice echoed through translation devices, honey-sweet and venomous. How gracious of humanity to attend their own trial. Cale descended the steps, feeling every eye upon him. The gallery murmured in dozens of languages, all feeding through his implant in a disorienting chorus. Fear, suspicion, satisfaction. We attend because we respect this institution, Cale said clearly. Even when it fails to respect us. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Zethra's head crest flared violet, a sign of affront among her people. Respect. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. You arrive at our doorstep barely a century ago, primitive and violent, and now you demand respect? You spread like a plague across the stars, claiming worlds, building warships disguised as cargo vessels, training every civilian in combat tactics. You are a species born from conflict, and you bring that poison wherever you go. We defend ourselves, Cale countered. Every species here has a military. The Vrwenen Stellar Armada is 3 times the size of our entire fleet. The Vrwenen have earned their strength over millennia of measured growth, Counselor Brenix interjected, his rocky features impassive. You demand the privileges of civilization without demonstrating the wisdom that comes with age. Dr. Reeve whispered urgently. Cale, the vote's already decided. They're going to impose sanctions. Quarantine maybe. We need to accept this and negotiate the terms. But Cale saw something else in the eyes around him. Not just fear or contempt. There was hunger there. The Vrwenen had been the dominant power for 2,000 years, and humanity's rapid rise threatened that dominance. This trial wasn't about justice. It was about eliminating competition. Let me understand the charges clearly, Cale said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. We are too successful. We grow too quickly. We defend ourselves too effectively. We refuse to wait centuries for permission to thrive. These are our crimes. You oversimplify, Zethra hissed. No, I clarify. Cale stepped forward. This council fears humanity because we've accomplished in decades what took you millennia. Not through conquest. Not through subjugation. Through determination, innovation, and unity. You're not afraid we'll attack you. You're afraid we'll surpass you. The chamber erupted. Shouts of outrage mixed with scattered applause. Counselor Brenix's voice boomed over the chaos. Order. Ambassador Morven, you test this council's patience. Good, Cale said quietly, but his implant amplified it across the hall. Because humanity's patience is exhausted. Sienna touched his arm, a warning. They were 3 humans in a room of thousands. But Cale was done playing the supplicant. Humanity had spent a century proving they belonged among the stars. It was time the council learned what happened when you cornered the most stubborn species in the galaxy. The verdict will be delivered at cycle's end, Zethra announced, her satisfaction evident. Until then, Ambassador, I suggest you prepare your species for isolation. Kale met her gaze and smiled. Counselor, I suggest you prepare for something else entirely. The human delegation's quarters were modest by council standards. 3 rooms overlooking the diplomatic gardens, a far cry from the palatial suites afforded to elder species. Kale paced the length of the sitting room while Sienna checked for surveillance devices and Dr. Reeve activated a quantum scrambler. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, Sienna said, crushing a listening device under her heel. Threatening the council? They could arrest us right now. Let them try. Kale's calm surprised even himself. The fear that had gripped him in the chamber had transformed into something else. Clarity. Tomas, what's the status of the Titan protocol? Dr. Reeves' fingers flew across his holographic interface. Are you serious? Kale, that's a last resort option. It's never even been tested in a real scenario. We're past last resorts. They're going to quarantine us, cut off our trade routes, strangle us economically until we're forced to accept vassal status under VRN oversight. I read the proposal drafts you hacked last week. Sienna's eyes widened. You hacked the council's secure network? Someone had to, Tomas said defensively. And technically I didn't hack anything. I just convinced their security AI that I was authorized to access the files. Artificial intelligences love humans, we're novel. Tomas. Right, sorry. The Titan protocol is ready. All 15 battle carriers are in position at the designated jump points. But Kale, if we do this, there's no going back. We'll be declaring that humans operate outside council authority. Kale stopped pacing and stared out at the gardens, where alien dignitaries strolled among bioluminescent flowers. Beautiful. Peaceful. A lie built on centuries of stagnation and carefully maintained hierarchies. The council preached harmony, but their harmony meant knowing your place and staying there. Humanity had never been good at staying put. The VRN have been planning this for 5 years, Kale said quietly. Ever since we discovered the Cascade Drive and started reaching systems they'd written off as inaccessible. They've been positioning their allies, crafting the narrative, building the case. This trial is theater. The sentence is already written. Then why'd they bother with a trial at all? Sienna asked. Because the council thrives on legitimacy. They need to believe that their rules matter. Strip away that pretense and you expose what they really are, the oldest species maintaining power through bureaucracy and tradition. A chime announced a visitor. Sienna's hand went to her concealed blade, another rule broken, but she'd never entered a viper's nest unarmed. Tomas checked his scanner. It's Ambassador Nyx from the Solaran Collective, he said, surprised. She's alone. The door opened to reveal a being of living light, her photonic form barely contained within a humanoid shape. Ambassador Nyx had always been cordial to humanity but never overtly friendly. The Solarans were neutral in most disputes, observers rather than participants. Ambassador Morven, she pulsed, her voice like distant music. I come with information and a warning. May I enter? Kale nodded and Nyx glided into the room. Her luminescence dimmed respectfully. The verdict is already prepared, she began without preamble. Complete economic quarantine for 50 years, followed by enforced integration under VRN administrative guidance. Your colonies will be placed under council supervision. Your military will be disbanded and absorbed into the VRN armada. Humanity will exist but not as an independent species. Enslavement dressed up in diplomatic language, Sienna spat. Precisely, Nyx agreed. And I am not the only one who sees this injustice. The Karathi Federation has protested. The Matharian clans are uncomfortable with the precedent. Even some VRN counselors think Zethra has overreached. But the majority will vote for the sanctions. They fear change more than they value fairness. Why are you telling us this? Kale asked. Nyx's form brightened, edges sharpening. Because in my species' long existence, we have seen civilizations rise and fall. We have watched the council calcify, turning from a force for cooperation into a mechanism for control. The VRN have held dominance for too long, and power breeds complacency. The galaxy needs disruption, Ambassador. It needs change. And you think humanity can provide that? I think humanity is the first species in a millennium capable of challenging the established order. Whether that's a good thing or a catastrophe remains to be seen. But I would rather witness a galaxy in flux than watch it slowly die of stagnation. She moved toward the door then paused. The Council Hall's defensive grid operates on VRNN military architecture. Their shields are designed to contain external threats, not internal ones. The defense station positioning assumes enemies approach from space, not from within the council chambers themselves. I share this information merely as an observation of architectural inefficiency, you understand. Kale understood perfectly. Thank you, Ambassador. Don't thank me yet. What you're considering will reshape galactic politics for centuries. Choose wisely, Ambassador Morven. The weight of your species' future rests on the next few hours. When she left, the three humans stood in silence. Finally, Sienna spoke. So, we're really doing this. Kale pulled up his secure comm link. Get me Admiral Takara. It's time to activate the Titan Protocol. And God help anyone who stands in our way, Tomas added quietly. Admiral Chio Takara's face materialized in holographic blue above Tomas's communication device, her expression carved from stone. Behind her, the bridge of the Eugenus Indomitable hummed with activity, officers moving with practiced efficiency. Ambassador Morven, she said formally, though her eyes betrayed relief. I was beginning to think you'd choose diplomacy over pragmatism. I chose diplomacy first, Kale replied. They chose betrayal. Are the battle carriers in position? All 15 precisely where we planned. The Council's monitoring stations have detected us, but they believe we're conducting standard patrol exercises at the quarantine perimeter. The VRNN Armada has 4 capital ships within strike range, but they're positioned defensively. They're not expecting an offensive action. Because no one's ever attacked the Council, Sienna observed. Which makes us either insane or brilliant, Takara said with a thin smile. Let's hope for brilliant. Ambassador, walk me through your plan one more time. I need to be certain before I commit 15,000 crew members to what the galaxy will call an act of war. Kale activated a 3-dimensional display of the Council Hall and surrounding space. The key is understanding their psychology. The Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years not through overwhelming force, but through consensus and tradition. They've forgotten what conflict looks like. Their security is designed to prevent external invasion, not internal disruption. You're going to turn the Council Hall itself into a battlefield, Takara said slowly, understanding dawning. You're going to force them to fight where they've only ever talked. Not fight. Demonstrate. The moment the verdict is announced, the VRNN will move to enforce it. They'll detain us, seize our ships, begin the occupation of our colonies. But if we act first, if we take control of the Council Hall and hold it, we change the entire equation. Tomas expanded the display, highlighting structural weak points. The Hall's defense grid is impressive but outdated. It's designed to withstand orbital bombardment, not directed EMP bursts from inside. I've identified 17 critical nodes. Take those out and we create a communications blackout. The Council can't coordinate, can't call for help, can't even broadcast what's happening. And while they're blind? Takara prompted. Your battle carriers jump in, Kale continued. Not to attack but to create a perimeter. You blockade Zenthari Prime, preventing any intervention. The VRNN Armada will be forced to choose, attempt to break through your lines and risk full-scale war or negotiate. You're betting they'll choose negotiation, Sienna said. That's a hell of a bet. It's not a bet. It's strategic certainty. The VRNN are bureaucrats and administrators, not warriors. They've maintained power through careful diplomacy for 2 millennia. The one thing they can't risk is looking weak in front of the Council. If we demonstrate that humanity can and will fight back, that we can penetrate their supposedly impregnable capital, disable their systems, and hold their precious Council Hall, we shatter the illusion of VRNN invincibility. Admiral Takara leaned forward. And the casualties, Ambassador? Because make no mistake, people will die. Council security forces, maybe VRYNN military, possibly some of our own people. Are you prepared to carry that weight? Kale met her gaze steadily. I'm prepared to carry the weight of humanity's survival. If we allow this quarantine, if we bend to this verdict, we condemn our species to permanent subordination. Our children's children will grow up as second-class citizens in a galaxy we helped explore. So yes, Admiral, I'm prepared for casualties. Because the alternative is the slow death of everything that makes humanity special. Silence stretched across the quantum link. Then Takara nodded once, sharply. Titan Protocol is active. I'll have dropships ready to extract you and anyone else who wants to leave. But Ambassador, if you're staying in that hall when hell breaks loose, I'm sending in extraction teams whether you like it or not. Fair enough. Timing is critical. The verdict is scheduled for announcement in 6 hours, at the height of the ceremonial session when all council members are present. That's when we move. 6 hours, Takara confirmed. Morven, one more thing. If this works, if we actually pull this off, humanity will never be able to return to the way things were. We'll have declared ourselves a power that refuses to bow. Every species will have to recalibrate their relationship with us. Good, Kale said firmly. I'm tired of asking for permission to exist. And if it doesn't work? If the VRWNN call our bluff and attack anyway? Then humanity goes down fighting on our feet rather than living on our knees. Admiral, I'll see you when this is over. One way or another. The hologram flickered and died. Tomas let out a long breath. 6 hours to commit treason and change galactic history. Anyone want to get lunch first? Despite the tension, Sienna laughed. You know what? Yes. If we're about to become the most wanted people in the galaxy, I'm doing it on a full stomach. Kale allowed himself a small smile. To the commissary then. But we eat fast. We have a revolution to prepare. They walked out into the corridor, 3 humans about to challenge an empire. The guards at their door, 2 massive Karathi warriors, watched them pass with what might have been respect. Or perhaps they simply recognized the look of people who had nothing left to lose. The council hall filled slowly, representatives taking their designated seats in order of species seniority. The VRWNN occupied the prime positions closest to the judgment dais, their scaled heads held high with the certainty of the righteous. Further back, younger species whispered among themselves, sensing something momentous in the air. Kale watched from the human observation box, flanked by Sienna and Tomas. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands remained steady. Below his formal robes, he wore a combat-ready tactical suit. Sienna had her blade and 2 concealed plasma charges. Tomas carried what looked like a ceremonial data tablet but was actually a military-grade hacking interface. I'm detecting increased security scans, Tomas murmured, his eyes on his device. They're nervous. They know we might cause a scene. Let them be nervous, Kale replied. Nervous people make mistakes. Counselor Zethra slithered onto the judgment dais, her ceremonial regalia catching the light. Behind her, the great holographic seal of the Galactic Council rotated slowly, 10,000 species united in harmony. Kale wondered how many of them truly believed that anymore. This council is convened, Zethra announced, her voice carrying perfectly through the acoustics. We gather to render judgment on the species known as humanity, charged with violations of the Harmony Accords, Article 7. Aggressive militarization and territorial expansion posing a threat to galactic stability. The charges were read in full, a litany of humanity's supposed crimes. Each colony established became unlawful territory seizure. Each defensive fleet became mobilization of aggressive forces. The KRWL incident was framed as intimidation through martial superiority. The evidence is clear and overwhelming, Zethra continued. Humanity has demonstrated patterns consistent with historical aggressive species. Left unchecked, they will destabilize the careful balance our ancestors built. Therefore, the Council has deliberated and reached a verdict. Kale's comm device vibrated once. Admiral Takara's signal. Battle carriers jumping to attack positions in 30 seconds. The verdict is as follows, Zethra said, savoring each word. Humanity is hereby placed under Category 5 quarantine for a period of 50 standard years. All human vessels will be impounded. All colonial territories will be placed under Council supervision, administered by the VRWNN Protectorate. Human military forces will be disbanded and absorbed into. No, Kale said, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. The hall fell silent. 2,000 heads turned toward the human delegation. Zethra's eyes narrowed. Ambassador Morven, you are out of order. The verdict is final. The verdict is tyranny, Kale replied, stepping to the edge of the observation box. And humanity rejects it. Security forces began moving, but Kale was faster. He raised his hand and Tomas triggered the device. 17 precisely targeted EMP bursts erupted from hidden points throughout the hall. Maintenance drones that Tomas had reprogrammed over the past week. The hall's communication systems died instantly, plunging the chamber into a different kind of silence. The great holographic seal flickered and died. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in stark red. What have you done? Zethra shrieked, though without amplification, her voice barely carried. I've started a conversation, Kale said calmly. One you're going to listen to. Chaos erupted. Security forces rushed toward the human delegation, but Sienna was already moving, her training transforming her into a blur of controlled violence. She didn't kill, didn't need to, but 3 guards went down in rapid succession, stunned and disarmed. Tomas broadcast on emergency frequencies, a message that would reach every ship in the system. This is Ambassador Kale Morvan of humanity. The Galactic Council has issued an unjust verdict against my species. We do not accept it. As of this moment, the Council Hall is under human control. Any attempt to interfere will be met with appropriate response. The hall's massive doors sealed shut, Tomas's hacking extended even there. Outside, Kale could imagine the confusion as Admiral Takara's battle carriers dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons hot and targeting solutions locked on every VRNN military asset in the system. You've committed an act of war. Counselor Brennix roared, his rocky form somehow towering even while seated. You've attacked the council itself. No, Kale corrected, descending the steps toward the judgment dais. Security forces formed a perimeter, but he saw the uncertainty in their eyes. They trained for external threats, for terrorists and assassins. Not for a formal ambassador backed by military force turning their sacred hall into a hostage situation. We've rejected an unjust verdict. There's a difference. He reached the center of the hall where Zethra stood, her body coiled in defensive fury. Here's what's going to happen, Counselor. You're going to reconvene this session. You're going to hear humanity's actual case, not the fiction you've constructed. And you're going to understand something important. We didn't come to the stars begging for acceptance. We came as equals. You're outnumbered, Zethra hissed. Thousands against 3. No, said a voice from the upper galleries. Ambassador Nyx descended, her photonic form blazing. Thousands against 4. The Solaran Collective stands with humanity. Another voice, deep and resonant. The Matherian clans also protest this injustice. A cluster of gray-skinned warriors stood, their hands pointedly away from their weapons. The Karathi Federation calls for review, rumbled yet another representative. Kale watched as nearly a quarter of the council rose in support. Not a majority but enough. Enough to show that the VRNN's grip on power wasn't as secure as they'd believed. Outside, his comm device chirped. Takara's voice, we're in position. The VRNN armada is holding position. They're requesting negotiation. Kale allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Then let's negotiate. The council hall remained locked down, its communication blackout complete. Outside, on every viewscreen still functioning in Zenthari Prime's orbital stations, the sight was unprecedented. 15 human battle carriers arranged in perfect formation, their weapons arrays lit up like stars. The VRNN armada's 4 capital ships hung at a distance, neither advancing nor retreating. A standoff. The first in council history. Inside the hall, Kale stood at the judgment dais while Tomas worked frantically to restore selective communications. They needed to broadcast what happened next to the entire galaxy but on their terms. Sienna maintained watch over the sealed entrances, her blade ready, though no one had tried to breach them yet. You cannot hold this position indefinitely, Counselor Brennix said, his voice like grinding stone. Your ships will run out of supplies. Your crew will tire. Eventually you must surrender. Eventually, Kale agreed. But not today. And every hour we hold this hall, every moment you can't remove us, proves my point. The Council isn't omnipotent. The VRYNN aren't invincible. The old order can be challenged. This is madness, a Valian representative chittered, her insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. You risk galactic war over pride? Not pride. Principle. Kale turned to address the assembled council, his voice carrying in the eerie quiet without electronic amplification. Every species here began as we did, reaching for the stars, building ships, exploring the unknown. But you've forgotten that hunger. You've become comfortable, static. When humanity showed that same drive, you didn't celebrate it. You feared it. We feared the pattern, Zethra interjected. History shows us what aggressive species become. The Kryn Wars, the shattering of Delios, the plague fleets of Xerxian expansion, all began with species like yours. Ambitious, violent, unable to be satisfied. Or perhaps, Ambassador Nyx suggested, her light pulsing thoughtfully, history shows us what happens when ambitious species are suppressed rather than integrated. The Kryn Wars began because the Council tried to limit their expansion, not because they were inherently aggressive. The Delios shattering occurred after centuries of marginalization. The patterns you see may be self-fulfilling prophecies. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Kale seized the moment. I propose a challenge, he said clearly. The Council claims humanity is too aggressive, too militaristic, too dangerous. Fine. Let's test that claim. Give us 10 years of monitored autonomy. We'll open our colonies to Council observers, submit our military movements to joint oversight committees, and demonstrate that our growth comes from innovation, not conquest. If after 10 years we've violated Council law or proven hostile, then impose your sanctions. But judge us on our actions, not your fears. 10 years is nothing, a VRWNN counselor objected. Species take centuries to reveal their nature. Then the VRWNN have nothing to fear from giving us a decade, Sienna called from her post. Unless you're worried we'll actually succeed. Unless you're terrified that in 10 years humanity will have proven we deserve the power we've claimed. The accusation landed like a physical blow. The VRWNN section of the hall erupted in protests, but Kale noticed others watching silently, considering. The younger species especially seemed intrigued by the proposal. Tomas's device chirped. We're getting incoming from Admiral Takara. The VRWNN armada is moving but not to attack. They're repositioning to defensive formation. I think they're actually considering negotiation. Because they know what happens if they attack, Kale said quietly. Our battle carriers can't win a prolonged war against the full Council forces. But we can bloody the VRWNN armada badly enough to shatter their reputation. We can make them look weak. And weakness is something the VRWNN cannot afford, Nix added. Their entire power structure depends on the perception of invulnerability. If humanity can challenge them successfully, even once, every species they've dominated for 2,000 years will begin to question. As if on cue, the sealed door shuddered. Someone was cutting through from outside with plasma torches, likely VRWNN military units attempting entry. Time's running out, Sienna warned. Once they breach, this gets messy. Kale nodded. Tomas, open a channel. All frequencies. I want every ship, every station, every colony in Council space to hear this. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1, you're live. Kale took a breath, then spoke to the galaxy. This is Ambassador Kale Morvan of humanity. Today the Galactic Council attempted to strip my species of its sovereignty based on fear and political maneuvering. We have responded not with violence, but with resistance. We hold the Council Hall not as conquerors, but as equals demanding to be heard. To the species watching, ask yourselves if the Council still represents justice, or merely the interests of its oldest members. To humanity, stand ready. Whatever happens next, we face it on our feet. To the VRWNN, we offer negotiation, not surrender. Choose wisely. He cut the transmission. Outside, the cutting stopped. In the silence that followed, every being in the hall waited to see if the galaxy would explode into war. Or if, perhaps, something new might emerge from the chaos. Incoming transmission, Tomas said, his voice tight. It's VRWNN High Command. They want to talk. Kale smiled grimly. Then let's talk. The holographic communicator flickered to life, projecting the image of VRWNN High Commander Theros Kalmareth, his deep blue scales marked with the gold insignia of supreme military authority. His eyes, 3 of them, arranged triangularly on his serpentine head, studied Kale with undisguised contempt. Ambassador Morvan, he began, his voice layered with harmonics that betrayed barely controlled rage. You have committed an unprecedented act of aggression against the Council. Do you comprehend the magnitude of your error? I comprehend that your attempt to subjugate my species was the error, Commander, Kale replied evenly. I'm simply correcting it. Correcting it? Kelmaritha's crest flared crimson. You hold the Council Hall hostage. Your fleet threatens Zenthari Prime. You've disrupted 10,000 years of order. This is correction? Yes, Kale said simply. Sometimes order requires disruption. Sometimes peace requires conflict. Surely a military commander understands that. The barb struck home. Kelmaritha's center eye narrowed. What are your demands? Not demands. Terms of negotiation. Kale activated his own holographic display, showing a document Tomas had prepared. First, the immediate nullification of the quarantine verdict. Second, formal recognition of humanity's right to autonomous expansion within unclaimed territories. Third, Council membership with full voting privileges, not as junior members but as equals. The VRWNN commander's laughter echoed through the hall. Equals. You've been in space for a century. The VRWNN have guided galactic affairs for 2 millennia. And in that time, how many new species have joined the Council with full privileges? Ambassador Nix interjected, her photonic form brightening. How many have been allowed to rise above satellite status? The Solarian Collective was admitted 400 years ago and still awaits full voting rights. The process requires patience, Kelmareth began. The process requires being VRWNN or VRWNN approved, Kale cut him off. That's not governance. That's oligarchy. And humanity rejects it. Then humanity will be destroyed. Kelmareth's words hung in the air like a death sentence. I have 12 more capital ships arriving within the hour. Your 15 battle carriers are impressive, but you cannot win a military confrontation. No, Admiral Takara's voice joined the transmission, her image appearing beside Kelmareth's. But we can make victory Pyrrhic enough to end the VRWNN dominance forever. Commander, you have 4 capital ships at Zen3 Prime. We have targeting solutions on all 4. The moment you order an attack, we fire. Your ships will be crippled or destroyed before reinforcements arrive. And my reinforcements will annihilate your fleet, Kelmareth countered. Probably, Takara agreed calmly. But not before we broadcast footage of the battle across every channel in Council space. The entire galaxy will watch the VRWNN armada struggle against humanity's defensive fleet. They'll see your ships damaged, your crews evacuating, your tactical superiority challenged. Even if you win militarily, you lose politically. The calculation played out in Kelmareth's eyes. He was a warrior but also a strategist. The VRWNN had maintained power through a combination of actual strength and perceived invincibility. If humanity forced them into a costly battle, even a victorious one, that perception shattered. There is another option, Councillor Brennick said, his massive form moving forward. A compromise that serves all interests. The Karathi Federation speaks? Kelmareth's tone dripped with disdain. The Karathi Federation suggests, Brennick's rumbled. Humanity's challenge has revealed a truth we've ignored. The Council has become stagnant. Perhaps not all species need centuries of observation. Perhaps younger, more dynamic civilizations bring value precisely because they disrupt comfortable patterns. You would reward aggression? Zethra demanded. I would reward courage, Brennick replied. The Karathi respect strength and humanity has demonstrated it. Not through conquest, but through willingness to stand alone against overwhelming opposition. That is worthy of recognition. The Matharian clans concur, added another voice. Let humanity prove themselves. Give them provisional membership, limited voting rights subject to review after 10 years. If they demonstrate responsibility, grant full membership. If they prove dangerous, then impose restrictions. But do so based on evidence, not prejudice. The chamber filled with debate, species arguing for and against. Kale watched the dynamics shift, saw alliances forming and fracturing in real time. The council had always functioned on consensus, but true consensus required all voices to be heard, not just the loudest or oldest. Finally, Kelmareth spoke again. If we agree to this compromise, you will surrender the council hall immediately. Your forces will withdraw to defensive positions. And humanity will accept council observers monitoring your expansion. Agreed, Kale said. On one condition, the observers are chosen from neutral species, not VRWNN appointees. Kelmareth's hesitation was brief. Acceptable. But Ambassador, understand this clearly. You've won a battle today, but the war for humanity's place in this galaxy has only begun. We will be watching. And if you prove as dangerous as we suspect, the response will be absolute. Then watch closely, Commander, Kale replied. You might learn something about what humanity can achieve when we're not fighting for our right to exist. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Kale turned to face the council. Someone unlock these doors. We have terms to formalize. 3 months had passed since the day the council hall became a battlefield. The galaxy was still reeling, still adjusting to the new reality that a century-old species had rewritten the rules of galactic politics through sheer audacity. Kale stood on the observation deck of the UHNS Indomitable, watching Earth rotate slowly below. Blue and green and beautiful, the world that had birthed a species stubborn enough to challenge an empire. Admiral Takara stood beside him, her formal uniform replaced with more comfortable duty attire. The council ratified the provisional membership this morning, she said, handing him a datapad. Full voting rights pending the 10-year review period. Neutral observers from the Solarian Collective and Karathi Federation. Unrestricted expansion rights in unclaimed territories, subject to standard colonization protocols. We won, Kale said, but the words felt hollow somehow. We survived, Takara corrected. Winning comes later. The VRWNN haven't forgiven us. Councillor Zethra tried to block the ratification 3 times. Half the council still views us as dangerous upstarts. Then we'll prove them wrong. Kale pulled up holographic displays of new human colonies, 17 more systems claimed in the months since the standoff, each one pushing further into unexplored space. Or prove them right depending on your perspective. The galaxy's changing, Kale. 6 more species have petitioned for membership reviews since our confrontation. The Turellian Hive, the Quellan Nomads, even the Fractious Youth Collective. They all saw what happened and realized the old barriers weren't as solid as they thought. Good. Kale expanded the display to show the entire galactic arm. The councils had 10,000 years to perfect stagnation. Time for some evolution. A chime announced another visitor. Dr. Tomas Reeve entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. The last of the diplomatic protocols are finalized. We have embassy space on Zenthari Prime, formal trade agreements with 43 species, and most importantly, we've established the Human Council Technology Exchange Program. The Vioranen must love that, Sienna Vex commented, joining them. She'd been promoted to Chief of Diplomatic Security, a position that now came with significantly more resources and authority. Sharing our Cascade Drive technology. Sharing selective aspects of it, Tomas clarified with a grin. We're not stupid. But yes, the innovation exchange was crucial. It shifts the narrative from dangerous humans hoarding technology to generous humans advancing galactic science. Plus, we get access to council archives dating back millennia. The knowledge transfer is mutual. Kale studied his team, these 3 people who'd stood with him when he'd made the most dangerous gamble in human history. They'd changed the galaxy together for better or worse. There's something else, Takara said, her tone shifting to cautious. Ambassador Nix contacted me privately. She says the Solaran Collective has discovered something in their deep space surveys. Something that might explain why the Council has been so obsessed with maintaining order and preventing aggressive species. What kind of something? Kale asked. She wouldn't say over standard channels. But her exact words were, the Council fears internal threats because they know what lies beyond the outer rim. She wants to meet with you in person, somewhere the VRWNN can't monitor. A chill ran down Kale's spine. In all the focus on political maneuvering and diplomatic victories, he'd never questioned why the Council was so risk-averse, so desperate to maintain their careful balance. When, he asked. Next week. Neutral station in the Kepler expanse. Just you, me and Nix. Kale nodded slowly. Humanity had won its place at the Council table, but perhaps that table was more complicated than he'd realized. Perhaps the VRNN's paranoia about aggressive species wasn't just about power and control. Perhaps there was a reason the galaxy had been kept carefully peaceful for 10 millennia. Set it up, he said. And Takara? Keep the fleet ready. Something tells me humanity's challenges are just beginning. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its eternal rotation, unaware that its children had just taken their first real steps into a galaxy far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. In the weeks that followed, the story spread across human space, transmitted from colony to colony, ship to ship. The tale of how Ambassador Kale Morvan and 3 humans had stood against the Galactic Council and won. How humanity had refused to bow, refused to accept subjugation, refused to wait patiently for permission to thrive. Children would learn about the day the Council Hall became a battlefield. Soldiers would study the Titan Protocol as an example of strategic brilliance. Diplomats would analyze Kale's negotiation tactics for generations. But Kale himself knew the truth, they hadn't won a war. They'd simply claimed the right to fight one. The real test of humanity's place in the galaxy was still to come, in the years ahead when they would have to prove that their courage was matched by wisdom, their strength tempered by restraint. As he stood watching Earth, Kale made a silent promise to the billions below. Humanity would meet that test. They would show the galaxy that a young species could grow not just powerful but responsible. That disruption and stability weren't opposing forces, but necessary partners in the evolution of civilization. The day humans turned the Galactic Council into a battlefield was over. The era of what humanity would build from that battlefield had only just begun. And somewhere in the outer rim, beyond the carefully patrolled boundaries of Council space, something waited in the darkness. Something that would test humanity's newfound strength in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But that was a story for another day.